Well, welcome to Coffee in the Co. Although I'm in the library and there's nobody in the Co today. Our Co gallery is our gallery on the second floor, our largest space. It currently houses our Warhol exhibition. We basically are having coffee in the Shuford because the exhibition we're talking about is our Contemporary Voices show that is on exhibition for just a few more weeks. So if you have not been in to see the show, we invite you in to come and see the work. And we are very excited today to be joined by one of the artists, our amazing, amazing friend, Juan Logan. And for Coffee in the Co., I just want to give you a little bit of background. This group formed a couple years ago, and we meet twice a month on the second and fourth Thursday at 10:30. We have been on Zoom for a while, but it looks like based on what the governor said, maybe we can start moving forward in person. So that's exciting. I see some clapping. I know that our regulars are very anxious to get back together so that we can actually have coffee together. It's a fun group. This group was formed to discuss art, and it really is about conversation. It's about learning together. It's about traveling around the museum, taking one exhibition at a time, digging into our collection, asking artists to join us like our friend Juan today, and really learning and moving forward together. It's meant to be conversational. So I know there's a lot of us on the call, but I would love, as we get going, I mean, when do you get a chance to be on the call with Juan Logan and maybe ask him a question? Today's the day. So please be thinking about anything that you would like to ask Juan or ask the group, or just to please feel open and welcome to express your opinion about what we're talking about. This is a safe space where we are all friends, and we are going to have a great time. So I'm going to turn it over to Executive Director John Carfagno to do our welcome to our special friend, and then we will get going with our program. Thank you, everyone, for joining today. There you go, John.
Okay. Well, good morning, everyone. It is amazing to virtually see everyone here at our online Coffee in the Co. And we were talking before about how long we have all been looking forward to today's conversation, really since the opening of the Contemporary Voices exhibition, which is highlighted by Juan Logan's breathtaking installation, Trying Not to Forget. So this show is unique for HMA in that it allows our audience to explore in depth how three of today's most innovative and thought-provoking artists challenge us to see the world anew. And my job is not an easy one today because I get to introduce one of those artists, but then I will look forward to joining you in the learning, discussion, and sharing that our Associate Director, Clarissa Starnes, will lead. So I would like to thank her and Christina for the amazing work that they have done on this show and the many programs it has produced. I also need to thank our generous sponsors, Art Bridges and SureTape. So introducing Juan is not a small feat. Not only has he accomplished so much, he has truly changed our team's lives. Admittedly, I was up all night trying to figure out the right words to communicate how important Juan is and what he means to us. His biography is extensive and can be found online, as well as in the many publications, exhibitions, catalogs, and interviews that he fields. His work is represented in the collections of the Whitney Museum of American Art, Philadelphia Museum of Art, and too many others to count. Closer to home, you can almost always see his work on view at the Mint, where he is in the collection a few times there. So in the didactic panel for the exhibition, I share an experience I had with his mixed media painting, Some Clouds Are Darker, which is in the collection and prominently installed at the Smithsonian's National Museum of African American History and Culture. If you have never visited this museum, please do so as soon as it is safe to travel. Please do that, because you will leave the museum a different person. For me, and undoubtedly countless others, Juan's painting there stands at the center of my journey through its galleries and spaces. I will never forget riding the elevator down to the galleries, which bring to life not only the indescribable pain, injustice, and suffering that define our nation, but also the perseverance and triumph of so many. Beginning in the 1500s, you encounter everything from the small shackles made for the fragile ankles of children to address designed by Tracy Reese for First Lady Michelle Obama. When you leave those galleries, which wind together, leading back to the ground floor level, the curators have chosen Juan's painting to be the very first thing that you see. So I'll wrap up by sharing how I summarize the experience of seeing Juan's painting in this context. It is absolutely impossible to focus on anything else within the space it occupies. Logan's art is singular in its unique ability to use a combination of everyday materials, technical virtuosity, and metaphor to communicate aspects of our shared existence that are too often left unexplored. His work opens the space for us to think more deeply and conceptually about the power structures and dynamics that shape our lives. Once you are touched by his imperative to ask better questions, you begin to see the world through a completely new lens. And I have found, and I know many others have, that after you do that, you want to go out and change it for the better. On behalf of our team and community, we are so grateful that Juan has chosen to share Trying Not to Forget for HMA's Contemporary Voices exhibition. I'm excited to turn the floor over to Juan and Clarissa, who will guide us through exploring this work.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John. So those of you that have hopped on our call, we are having a discussion today with artist Juan Logan, and we're going to start off with a video. I'll let Christina tee that up and tell you about that experience, and then play Juan's experience through the Contemporary Voices show, interacting with the Bruce Nauman, the Joseph Kosuth, and his own work. And then after that, we will begin with our discussion. And again, as I've mentioned before, Coffee and the Co is meant to be a conversation. So because there are a lot of us on here, I certainly don't want to play teacher, but if you want to raise your hand, a little signal to me, I'll make sure that you get plenty of time to ask your question and get that answered by Juan. But we will begin our conversation after the airing of this video.
And perhaps more looking at this in terms of what it is I'm commenting on, the whole notion of I don't get it or I'm confused, well, I can do that. I think these are things that we've all heard at one time or another when looking at contemporary work. And I think pieces by Bruce Nauman particularly have a way of bringing that forward for many people. It is not so much with Joseph Kosuth, although I think that can be challenging at times as well. My work, on the other hand, is always so accessible that people immediately get it, I'm sure. It's never in question, or rarely anyway. But it's also amazing.
They would never say I don't like it.
They'll never say I don't like it, yeah, right. And the thing about it, the whole notion of that when folks say that I can do that, well, not really. Not really, you know. It's the thing about the hula hoop, and I always think about that because it's such a simple idea. And they say, well, I could have done that, but you didn't do that, you know. And the person that did. Well, you know, it's interesting hearing Bruce Nauman's piece, even without seeing the image. One would have to admit that hearing that no over and over and over again, I mean endlessly, you know, that it would grate on you after a while. I have that potential, but the thing that's also exciting about it is the idea that often art has a way of not generating a particular response in you, and this does, and that's really the best part, you know. It's difficult to walk away and not feel something, you know. You either like the piece or love the piece, hate the piece, you know, but you definitely feel something about it, you know. And to listen to it for a long time, it has a way of perhaps wearing on you even more, you know, it really does. But, you know, as I was recently told, that after a while, though, that no sort of disappears and becomes more like, almost like a dog barking, in a way, you know. And then I would imagine if you listen to it long enough, that no would disappear almost completely. You know, and it would just become almost a monotone of sorts, you know, and become more of that, you know, than anything else. But the thing that is interesting, though, is aside from the sound, the video itself I think is engaging. Just that constant.
So we've had kids come in because we wanted their response.
Right.
And they had to, like,
Oh yeah.
move along.
Oh yeah, right. Well, kids will be able to identify readily. I've seen kids act just like that. And of course, there would be some adults that identify with this as well.
I think I've seen more adults.
I know. No. I love that. I think that's really great. This piece is always, for me, it's always been intended to be a very, very somber, quiet, meditative space. And certainly having Bruce there adds to that. It's almost like those voices of the choir singing, there's nice soft music in the background and everything else, and it's sort of like that, sort of kind of. But this piece, though, and trying not to forget, is all the folks that have moved on, all the folks that provided me with so many experiences and memories and everything else. And I think we work really, really hard in terms of trying not to forget. And from the images that are inside, from my mom to me sitting, my mom holding me when I was probably just 1 year old. And all the other images from my grandfather, my great-grandfather, but all those images are part of this. And I think we are always trying not to forget those things that we hold near and dear. The series I'm working on right now deals more with the absence of, the loss of memory, and how we fight really, really hard to hold on to those things. And the things that we deem really, really important to us, they have a way of slipping away from us anyway as time passes. I always think of them as being so important. At least they are at the moment. So we create these mementos. We have those from our relatives, or from loved ones, period, or friends, And this piece, which is really sort of an elegy for lost souls, and I always imagine there had to be some place for all those folks who didn't cross over the right way, so to speak, And we always have those friends, loved ones that got lost along the path, So this is that spot where they all sort of gather, and not in a bad way, not at all, But again, we remember them as well. It's just that we have a way of recalling them differently, that's all. If you can imagine closing your eyes and kneeling here, even with Bruce Nauman in the background, saying, no, 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 it is, even that sort of feels okay. It really does. You could arrive at a place where you didn't mind that so much. There's a sobering, sort of somber quality about that that sort of blends in with this sort of nicely. It really is. I think the contrast, too, that takes place between my work, Bruce Nauman's work, and Joseph Kosuth's work is expansive. But at the same time, conceptually, I think there's a way that they all work together. They all create different kinds of spaces, conceptually for us to respond to engage with, to enter. And I think that is probably the most exciting part of it all, of the three of us being together. It's true. I was just thinking also about the boat and how I always imagine the boat is transporting us from one place to another in terms of our memories, and then the idea of branding the boat, the inside of it and the outside, of course, but branding it so that it becomes, embedded in it becomes simply a part of it, something that we can't remove, that we can't just, it won't just disappear easily because it is so embedded. And, I was thinking about that pot that's in the background as well. I was talking about how we keep people alive and how we keep stories alive. And it's when we are having that family dinner and the whole family is there, a whole bunch of us, 25 plus people, that sort of thing. And it's really interesting that when something is prepared the way my Aunt Estelle would have prepared it, or my mom would have prepared it, and we recall those stories in terms of how much they love this particular dish, and in that moment, we're doing nothing but keeping them alive and keeping their stories alive and how they did it and why they did it and all those things, what's missing from it, all of that. And it's just another way of recalling, that's all. And, it's interesting, this piece I find particularly engaging in a very, very different way. The idea that as dense at the edge as at the center. And I think that says so much about how many times what we want out of something, that we want it to be as dense at the edge as at the center. It's not at the center where all the good stuff is. It's just as good on the outside, It really is. It's just as good. It's something that reads, there's a kind of truth in that, in terms of, isn't that what we hope for in many ways? That we want it to be, if it's dense and good over in here, don't we want the same thing at the very, very edge of it? We want it to be just as good. It's sort of like flavor, if you will. We don't want it to just be at the edges, or in the center of it. We want it to be at the edge as well. So every bite, everything, so truth is like that, I think. We want it to be whole. There's a wholeness about that idea, I think. Maybe that's what I'm responding to most. That there is a wholeness about it. A completeness. No. And again, hearing that in the background, it becomes almost like a crowd. Yeah, it's that noise that you can hear. You can't really understand exactly what's being said unless you listen really, really carefully. It sounds like a whole bunch of people talking. Like all this crowd is over there saying something, and it really going at it pretty well. But then there's this, you see. But one thing about Bruce Nauman's piece as it relates to this statement, it is just as intense at the edge as it is at the center. It really, really is.
You didn't know that he had a show here too right now, did you?
No, I didn't.
You want to go up?
Yeah.
Studio.
Yeah. I'll have to hang out there.
Yeah, who's that?
Is that us?
That's Grandma.
Are you serious? That's Grandma?
But look, can you look back? Don't touch anything. You see this picture back there?
Yeah.
That's Grandma holding Daddy.
Oh.
With Aunt Mary beside him and Uncle John. Not my brother, Uncle John, Monica's dad.
Oh, that's so cool.
And this right here, you see this lady right here? It's my favorite Aunt Estelle. It's my grandmother's sister.
And it must be Juan's as well, because he always talked about Estelle.
Aunt Estelle,
Yeah.
So she took care of me when I was a little girl. That's why I would go, before my parents would go back to work, she kept me. And then I went to school. I would go to her house every Friday night, and we'd watch game shows, and then in the morning we'd watch wrestling.
Well, that was fun.
Okay, I guess Clarissa disappeared. Let me see if she'll run in here.
Christina, if need be, she can use my computer also.
Juan, that was very nice.
Thank you.
I
Thank
enjoyed
you.
that.
Thank you. You know, it's interesting listening to and thinking about Bruce Nauman's work. The thing that's really, really exciting about it, and I think most people tend to miss out on the aspect of it. The thing that I think is most engaging about his work, and it's not just this piece, but all of his work, is that it doesn't leave you feeling nothing. You definitely feel something about it. You know, as I said before, you either like it, you dislike it, but something. And more times than not, and I think we've all experienced this in one way or another when we visit museums, you walk in, you see the work, you walk past the work, and it doesn't leave you with anything. You said, oh, and you look at it, you say, oh, that's nice, but that's as good as it gets many times. And you're looking for something, you want to feel something, feel more. Let's put it that way. And Bruce allows you to do that in a very immediate, sort of visceral way. You respond to it. And it doesn't get any better than that. It really doesn't in terms of a museum experience. To be able to walk in, engage with something, and then to walk away feeling pure love for it, pure hate for it, something, you know, but not feeling nothing.
Yeah, the fact that the person is dressed up as a jester,
Uh-huh.
a clown, if you will,
Yep.
it made me think that maybe the message there is how silly when we just stamp our feet and dig in and we just won't have a conversation. It's just a no, you know, how silly that is.
I know, it's true. It's so true. It is so true.
But I thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, my apologies, my friends. We're having internet issues today. So half of our building just lost internet, but we've still got Christina. So thank you for bearing with me. Juan, thank you for allowing us to watch that video and see your experience going through the show. We had a program on Tuesday night where 3 professors also went through the exhibition and experienced the show. And a professor, Dr. Michael Deckard of philosophy, made an important note about how with the Bruce Nauman, it was a 62-minute loop. Mm-hmm. And so he talked about how perception would change from the moment that you went into the show and first heard that sound until 62 minutes later. How would that have changed? So I'm curious, because even as you were going through the show, it seemed that your perception of the Nauman was changing. There was an adjustment into that being the background of you experiencing your own art in the Kosuth. And I'm curious about, since then, as you have thought about this installation and coming back to visit us, what is your perception now? Has that changed from your initial experience?
Well, not so much change, but I guess more of an acknowledgement. That's what I was just talking about. The whole idea that his work allows you to feel something, to be engaged with it. I mean, to truly be engaged, and to not simply be able to listen briefly and walk away from it. It holds you long enough to have feelings about it. And I think that's really wonderful. It really is. I think that's what we all want from our work in one way or another. Sometimes it's extremely subtle, but we still want that level of engagement. That's all, you know. And I think with so many of Bruce Nauman's pieces, they do that. They just do, you know. I have a very small Bruce Nauman piece that I've had for a while now, and while it's a 2-dimensional piece, it does the same thing though. It's sort of edgy, and it always leaves you feeling something in terms of a level of engagement. I love that.
Nice. Installation art. So we have panels throughout the show, one being, of course, about contemporary art and artists and introducing to the three of you, and then getting into a little bit about each one, video art, with yours about installation art. And there's a real nuance to it being site specific.
Mhm.
So a lot of installation work is created for the site it's going into.
Oh, yeah.
How did that work with our space? Obviously, your work had already been created. And what do you think about the installation in that Shuford Gallery?
Well, I like the installation. I commented to Christina that some years ago, I was doing a show and the space was about 5,000 square feet. So, and I was looking at how, again, how we've lost things in terms of cultural contributions made by, all people who live in this country. And so I went over on Interstate 95 and gathered up these long strips from things that have come off of tires on trucks and cars and so on and so forth, and bits and pieces of them. And they were part of they rested on the floor of this gallery. We changed all the lights in the gallery to put blue gels on them. So you really couldn't see exactly what those things were, but the long strips of tires became languages and all those things that had been lost because it's dealing with the whole issue of becoming Americanized and all of that and what that means. So I think even in this installation, I mentioned to Christine, I said, wouldn't it have been interesting to put blue gels on all these things? Because blue has always been used as a form of protection and all that.
Mm.
And you want to, I think certainly in building an installation or doing an installation, even though it evolves and changes with each installation many times, that becomes part of it. And you sort of enjoy that, I think. It is the opportunity to respond to the space very differently each time. But very much a part of it though, I think.
Are you happy with the change of installation, changing the intent in any way? Did it change anything about the meaning of your artwork, do you think, for our viewers?
The thing that I think is important, Clarissa, is that it's in conversation with these two other artists.
Mm-hmm.
And that changes everything. It really does. Because in listening to Bruce Nauman's work first, then coming into my installation, and then going to Joseph Kosuth's, and then back into my installation,
Mm-hmm.
All of those things bring something new to it, Yeah, and I think that's really, really important. I think it's a wonderful, the exhibition I think works really well. It really does, and I'm so happy to be a part of that. Thank you for inviting me to participate. It is, but I think that it is, it's only when you have the opportunity to be in conversation with other artists that you also respect and admire, and whose work, again, brings something entirely different than you're bringing. Can we expand the whole conversation? That's when that happens.
Yes. So your work, this installation dated 2003.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to us about the inspiration for this work and how it came to be, how you chose the materials that you used and got to a final art piece that we now have on exhibition.
Well, it's a funny thing, Clarissa, because years ago, and this is going back decades, I mean, many, many, many years ago, and it was in the show that you did, Juan Logan, Creating and Collecting, and it was my piece, Please Save This. It was Jesus standing in the boat and so on and so forth. I think I did that maybe 1960 something. I can't remember the date on that. But it was so interesting to me in 2003, here I was using a boat again. And even with the current series that I'm working on, I still use boats in that series as well. And that's, truly eons later, But I think those things recur. And I think the boat has always been a means of transporting, of keeping things together, allowing us to cross, that piece. There you go. Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
We're going to keep it very low tech, just to make
indeed. Yes, indeed.
Stay on the call.
I love that screen sharing. But it's the same kind of thing, though. I think that in allowing those things to migrate in and out of your work, if you will, it allows you to extend the conversation and to expand on what you were talking about initially, and how you've carried that whole idea forward.
Yes.
And everything that has occurred with that piece as you've moved forward and as you've grown as an artist and as an individual. So, but go ahead.
I was just going to say, do you, someone wrote about your work, Natasha Dockery, in an interview that you had commented that you turned the boat into a spiritual vessel in this work.
Right.
Is that a continuing theme? Is the boat showing up repetitively in your work as a spiritual vessel, or is that something that is very?
It really does, and it's I've used it to talk about all those folks leaving their homelands and moving to new lands, trying to anyway. All those that were lost, and I imagine those vessels as being those places where I designed this piece that was intended to be a big painting. And maybe one of these days I get around to doing, because it was going to be, I don't know, 10 by 20 feet or so, maybe 30 feet, big painting. And it's really of just this ship, this boat. And inside this boat were all of these clouds. Because see, I always imagine those clouds as being hopes and dreams and aspirations. And it's what people are carrying with them. Their reasons for moving, everything they hope for themselves, for their families, for their children, all of that, just for their futures. And how all of those things are sometimes only captured and held within that boat because they never were able to escape that boat. Those things sort of went down with it.
Wow.
And it is a very spiritual sort of thing. And we, again, while the people were lost, those dreams, those hopes and everything else often end up being carried forward by others who remain. It's how we keep them alive. It's how we keep hope alive, dreams alive, all of those things. So I think the spiritual nature of the boats that I use, it's sort of always been there, at least for the past 50 years or so. And it continues to be the case.
So let me show you here's our non-tech example of inside the boat.
Oh, yes.
Talk to us, we mentioned those clouds. Talk to us about the inside of this boat.
Well, that particular boat is made up of everything from adinkra symbols to four-leaf clovers, which really sort of talk about taking risk and how it's so necessary in order to move forward, almost always, to take risks, in terms of life. The Sinkofas that show up in the boat are tied more directly to the idea that we can't move forward without bringing our past with us. So you need to always go back and get it. And it's that sort of idea. So the boat I made the branding irons, branding the boat on the inside and outside. And so again, it's how we embed things in terms of our histories. And we want them to always be a part of it. We don't want them to just be blown away by the wind, so to speak.
I looked into the Sinkofa a little bit, and one quote was that it is not taboo to fetch what you have forgotten.
It's not.
But the meaning of that return, go, seek, which is the literal breakdown of the word Sinkofa, is that it's not taboo to fetch what you have forgotten.
Exactly.
Very profound.
So go back and get it.
You use the Sinkofa, the heart.
Right.
And then there's also one that is a bird that's flying forward while looking backward, correct?
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
So then there are different ones. And again, it's sort of like the blue that I sometimes use in my work. I always think about the Low Country in South Carolina and how blue was used around the windows and doors to keep away the evil spirits and so on and so forth. All the blue bottle trees that have been used by many different cultures and so on and so forth. And how all those things sort of come together. And it's almost as though, we're not that different from each other in that regard. We all want to take care of, to protect, to find ways that we can all sort of move forward, if you will, and carry our hopes and dreams with us. That's all.
And that's my favorite thing you say, Juan. That's all. Something very profound followed up with that's all. Does anyone have any questions or comments about the boat, the symbols used? Hulda.
Yes. I wondered why, Juan, you put the pictures up into the hall where we didn't really see them very well. And I stuck my camera down in the hall to get a picture of them so I could see them.
Right.
But I love photography and pictures of families and your old pictures. And I also had a question. Why did you put them up in there? And also, were they original pictures? They looked like they were your original pictures or did you copy them? That's just a technical thing, I wonder.
Well, see, that goes back to my grandfather.
Mhm.
He said, tell some, save some.
Mm.
Gotcha. Okay.
But I will answer your other question, though. No, in all seriousness, they were original to the extent that I have all those photographs as
Right.
part of my collection. And these are all digital images because it was important for me to make sure that they were secure and all of that. Yes.
Well, they looked like originals. You did a beautiful job.
Thank you very much. Thank you. As it relates to why they are in the area that they are in terms of the front of the boat there, some years ago, I did a painting. This is when I was exploring various religions and that sort of thing. So I did this thing that involved everything from Christianity to voodoo to, I mean, just different religions from around the globe, if you will. And they were all clearly visible. Okay. So then I did another painting and I put all those same symbols and everything else in the same places and all that on top of it, right? And then I painted over all of it. And I said, now that's what faith is about.
Mhm. Okay.
So simply because you can't always see them clearly or perhaps see them at all, doesn't mean that they aren't always there.
Mhm.
And that's really what it comes, that's why I did that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh, and
Yes.
and the kneeling chairs I'm not familiar with those. Do people actually kneel on them
They do.
in a church
Yeah,
service?
and your arms would rest on, sort of on the tops, if you will, or your hands. Yeah.
And your father or grandfather was a Presbyterian minister?
My father,
Your
he
father.
founded John Calvin Presbyterian Church in Nashville, Tennessee.
Well,
Yeah.
I grew up in Nashville, Tennessee. and
Homegirl.
we were Presbyterians too.
All right.
Glencliff Presbyterian Church.
Mhm. Very good.
Yes. Thank
Dear
you.
kitty. Goodness. Any other questions?
Kimberly, you have a question? Okay. I had two comments in the chat. One from Jackie that says, Bruce's piece is insistent and intrusive. It refuses to be ignored. And as Juan said, you will respond in some way. Unlike a 2D work, which may linger only in memory, Bruce's work buzzes in your ears as you walk through the gallery.
Mhm.
And then the next comment to that is from Alexandria. Bruce's piece is as powerful as it is, does seem to be overarching sound throughout. Does its intrusiveness leave enough room for the viewer to sense the spirituality of the boat in Juan Logan's piece? Is there a way to find the quiet of that spirituality, a place for contemplation? I wonder if the artist struggled to find that space in the exhibit.
Well, that's a good question. It really is. But here's what you have to consider. When we think about how we live our lives and how troubling things can be at times with everything that's going on in this country, say currently, can you within all of that on a daily basis, can you find a space that provides you a respite, if you will? You know, I mean, I think there's part of the things that we often believe in that provide us with that respite that we can always go to, that we can find peace, quiet. So with everything that's going on around you, I think it's pretty, it may not be the easiest thing for some, but I think we can always find a space if we truly want that space within our minds that is quiet, that does exclude some of that noise, if not all of it. That's all.
That's all. Interesting that when we were going through with one of the other professors, Dr. Beth Wright, professor of sociology, who was incredibly moved, I would say, on her behalf by your work, really struck almost quiet and really found that place while moving around. And in her experience and her talking through what she found in that work, Christina and I found that we couldn't hear the Nauman anymore. So it's very interesting that in that moment, Christina, if you want to speak into that too, there was a chance that we had and we found to be contemplative and quiet in conjunction with the Nauman while looking at your work.
Yeah, that was the only time ever that Nauman was ever turned off, it seemed, was us watching her engagement with the piece. And later, Beth Wright reflected, saying it was because her soul had connected, and it was because of that connection she was able to turn everything else off that was around her.
Yes, yes. Speaking into the moment you were talking about the struggle that we have, but it seems it can be found, even literally with that Nauman in the background, that the connection with your work and other work and those moments can be found. I'm curious if anyone from Coffee and the Co or anyone who's been in had that kind of experience while you were in the gallery. Does someone want to speak into their experience while interacting with the three works, and how those experiences were mingled together, if you found that place or not? I know some of you have been in.
I have a comment, but I don't know if it's appropriate or not, but it's just, I'll tell you what those pieces of being all together made me feel. The No, No, No was kind of like a chorus in the background of your boat. And it kind of was like, no, I don't want to be in that boat. And no, I don't want to lose these memories. You know, I miss these people, these pictures. And so to me, it complemented, even if not intended to.
All right.
Chris?
Thank you.
Like you were going to say something?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
If you ever taught elementary school, you were used to functioning with all that noise around you. So that was fine after I got over my initial annoyance. But the boat almost made me cry. So you have all that noise in the background, but my heart responded to the fact that all of my uncles and grandparents were people who worked in welding and iron, who were carpenters and bricklayers. And so despite all that noise, like Juan just said, all around us right now, my heart still responded very strongly to the quietness of that boat. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? So let's talk specifically about this Elegy for Lost Souls.
Screen sharing again.
Yes, we're fancy, okay? I'm trying to keep the call going, Juan. So with this work, we've had questions about these components in the center, the pincushion.
Well, the piece is made out of basswood. First, it's carved out of basswood. It's covered in tin that came from various places, from everything from a church up in Connecticut to my grandfather's barn. Which all seemed appropriate. The doll that you see there was actually an old pincushion that was made back in the 1920s. And again, almost like an Nkisi in a way, one of those power figures that you sort of add more power to by the things that you add to it as well. And then the flowers, of course, I mean, it wouldn't be, it's always appropriate to have flowers for those that you are honoring. And all the times that we place flowers on in the church, on grave sites and so on and so forth, we're never measuring or weighing the value of the person in terms of whether they were good or bad people. We're just trying to remember them in a very positive way. And I think that's all that I'm doing there. But the body, in this case, of this elegy, and and we all know that elegy, generally speaking, is just a poem for the dead when we think of it in those terms. So the body is swollen because it's filled and continues to be filled with all of these lost souls. And people get lost along the path for many different reasons, not all bad reasons, but lost nonetheless. And I think we all have trouble from time to time in terms of finding our way. Some get over, some don't, but this doesn't mean they necessarily go to bad places always, but there's a place for them, you see. At least I imagine that there is. That's all.
And the placement of the arms raised up seems like it could have a couple different meanings.
It could. And the thing that's interesting, if you look carefully at the doll figure, the doll figure has the exact same posture, if you will. It really does. And the bigger figure was based on that doll figure. on the pincushion. Yeah.
Now my neck hurts when I turn to the left.
I'm sorry.
Sorry, I was mumbling.
Oh, that's okay.
Turn us off.
Yeah, time to mute.
You're officially muted.
Thank you.
To me, the doll figure reminded me of a folk art piece. If you've been upstairs and seen some of the pieces there, and there was a piece there some years ago that it really resonated with me in terms of looking like a folk, well, it reminded me of a folk art piece, reaching out and for maybe acceptance, love, but that's what piece reminded me of.
Oh yeah. Well, some years ago I did a piece that was called Casting Shadows, and there was a boat in that one as well. And at the very, very front of the installation was this image of Jesus, actually, with outstretched arms, sort of up this way. The problem with the image, and I always questioned this in terms of the way the image was projecting itself, if you will, because I wasn't sure if the hands were saying, bless you, or don't come this way, you see. And again, many times when I raise questions, it's not to nullify anything or suggest one way or the other, but simply to ask the question, could this be interpreted either way? And if you do change the interpretation of it, how does that change the meaning of the piece? So with the hands on this figure on Elegy for Lost Souls, are they outreached? They could be. Or are they simply so swollen that they can't put their hands down anymore because they're so filled with all of those lost souls? And it's sort of like blowing up one of those blow up dolls, and as you blow them up, everything gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And then initially the hands were down by the side, and then they just come up and they just sort of stay in place because there's no place else for them to go.
It's interesting when I was listening to you talk about the Kosuth work, as dense at the edge as at the center, and about how that's what we're hoping for, right? This kind of that it's as good at the edge as it is at the center, and that it can be and could be. There's something in that takes me to that, a little bit of the symbols you use, and that looking back to go forward. That idea is, do you see any kind of a connection between those two statements? The idea of the Sinkofa, and then the idea of being as dense, something you don't think about as wanting something to be as dense at the edges at the center, but then you also sometimes don't think about needing to look back to go forward.
I think
there seemed to be something in your commentary that's looking connection.
I'm sorry. I think the idea of looking back, though, is tied more directly to the idea of acknowledging our past. And because many times we don't always acknowledge where we've been. We don't want to, but we can move forward a lot more effectively if we are willing to do so and bring it with us, so that we make sure, one, we don't repeat it, that it's something that's not to be repeated, and that we don't do it again. But if you were so intent on forgetting that you ever participated in those things in the first place, how you end up not participating again if you've truly forgotten what it was, how bad it was. Here's the thing too about conceptual work. It is the idea that drives everything. It's not the work itself so much. It is the idea that drives it. I remember working with a grad student many years ago, and who didn't want to produce and did not produce anything at all. This is a guy I was working with out in San Francisco, at the San Francisco Art Institute. And it was really interesting because his work was what he would do if he created something. And that was his work. And this is what it would look like. And in the end, he didn't make any of it. But we knew exactly what it would be.
Yes.
So ideas drive everything. They do. They just do. And I think that's what this is essentially about.
for sure the entire exhibition, all three
Yeah.
works,
Yeah.
in separate and in conjunction together.
Exactly.
About the
Exactly.
idea. Any questions? What about what Juan just said? Thoughts about the idea driving the work? Any questions? Diana, I certainly don't want to put you on the spot, but when we had our last coffee in the co, you made some good comments about your take about that piece and what it could mean and the boat and all of those. Would you be willing to share a little bit about your experience with Juan's work?
If I can recall.
I know, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but
It's been a minute. It's been a minute, but I think I referenced it being, it resonated with me in a spiritual way. And did I say or make reference to the point about homeward bound? Is that what I said?
Yes.
I think that's what I said.
Yes.
And then the pot, because I know when I was growing up, there were always big black pots on Saturdays. Well, a lot of times folks use the pots to wash in. They would use the pots on the weekend to have different pots, of course, to have fish fries, social events, those kinds of things. So the pot resonated with me that way as a part of my growing up and things that I experienced.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
We have a comment from Candy that she immediately felt something spiritual with that piece, the spirituality of it. And that's been the biggest comment that we've gotten. Want to speak into, there were a lot of questions about the direction the boat was headed. Mm-hmm. Was it going anywhere? Was it homebound? Were the kneelers directional components? Is it a float? Another thing that one of our professors said is that they noted that there were a lack of oars. So how was the boat? Was it just adrift? What about that component, Juan?
Well, I never imagined that you would need oars, you see, because we are the drivers of that boat, you see. And we are essentially telling it where we want to go, and we are ensuring that we will get it there, you see. In much the same way that we think in terms of our ancestors, I don't think they always knew exactly where they were going, but because of the path they chose, it changed everything for our futures, for my future, for the future generations, I should say. And I think that's really what it comes down to. It wasn't always tried and true because they didn't always know. It was precarious at times.
Yes. Any questions or comments about the directional component we were just talking about?
Did I remember seeing a pot in the boat? I couldn't remember.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, because I was thinking, oh, hey, Juan.
Hey, how you doing?
Here it is.
Yeah, I remember seeing that pot in the boat, and I was thinking when somebody was asking about the oars, I was like, well, you didn't really need the oars, but I can imagine on a journey like that, you would need that pot because sometimes, water comes in and you don't want to sink. So probably more so than the oars, you're going to need that pot. You're going to need that pot. So,
and the thing about it, Candy, is that, it's a place for nourishment.
Yeah, it serves so many different purposes on your journey.
Exactly.
So, yeah. Probably more so than having oars. Like I probably wouldn't even, the pot made way more sense to me,
It's interesting, the series I'm working on right now, Elegies, I did this one piece that was only of it was just a rudder. And all these people, there were hundreds of these people on this rudder, if you will. And they would all be lost because they couldn't guide the rudder. It was just a rudder floating in water. It would never save anyone. It just wouldn't do it, and it was sort of omnidirectional. You couldn't control it. And I think that becomes the issue. Whereas if the boat is, for the most part, always safe as long as you don't let the water in. As long as you can keep the boat dry on the inside, you'll be pretty good. Far longer than the other way around.
Yeah. I'm glad you said that, Candy. I was thinking of the pot in such a different context. Like, I appreciate you making that comment. It is about keeping afloat as well, right? In a different way. Oh, very interesting. Juan, you use symbols so much, abstractions, figuration, different ways. So significant throughout all of your work, and definitely your language to us. Is there a reason that symbols play such a significant part?
I think it's just a matter of developing a certain kind of vocabulary, visual vocabulary that you use. And I've developed this over the years, over the decades. And I think it allows me to speak very clearly in terms of my intent or intentions. And so it's more about that, perhaps. Many times, I love the idea of being as direct as I can possibly be, but at the same time, not always making it so clearly visible.
Right.
Because I don't think it needs to be. It allows me to speak about things that are perhaps really, really difficult. So because the language is my language, I'm not speaking to or for anyone beyond myself in that regard. So I just make the work.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's all. You just make the work. That's all. In the essay that Jen Edwards wrote for us in the Creating and Collecting catalog that went along with the exhibition that we had here, she talked about you having signature marks and talking about these abstractions and shapes that you use. I think if people follow your work, they see sometimes a lot of these things pop up again. Obviously, the head shape, things like of that nature. And she ended her essay with a line that said, "It may start in the southern clay of his ancestors, but it has become land we all," encompassing the blood and sweat of the enslaved and oppressed people, "but it has become land we all walk on, for which we all bear responsibility to tend and sow and revere." And I thought that was so profound because it is you're making the piece, that's all. And then it's out and installed in this gallery. And then we're interacting with this piece. And as we learn about what the symbols mean and we connect with it on a spiritual level, then we are moved to do better, to change. We have a responsibility, right? And that's what I find so profound about your work, is that you don't experience a Juan Logan work without being changed. I have found that every time I've interacted with any one of your works, and I've considered it such a grand honor to get to know you and call you a friend, but to also see your work. And when it was here on exhibition last year, COVID, of course, cut us short, but the show continued on and is traveling throughout Georgia. And so we're so excited that people are still getting to see that. But that's one of the biggest things that we have found, is that when people experience Juan Logan, there is a drive and a push for change. And we're all so incredibly grateful for that.
Thank you.
Anyone have any questions or comments for Juan? Bob, I see your hand. You can be unmuted now. There you go.
Comment that Juan just made, and again, in his self-deprecating manner, this idea, I just made the work. He commented earlier about working with a gentleman, if I recall him saying something in San Francisco, who had the idea, but let somebody else make the work. I think we also see that somewhat in the Kosuth model in terms of Joseph's, I don't want to say disdain for form and function and color, but the idea that it is about the idea, it's not about the creation. I wonder how, as an artist, again, Juan makes the work, how he thinks when he sees somebody else, again, it's my idea, but somebody else actually did it.
Well, I always think about Christian Boltanski, wonderful artist who made, look him up if you get a chance, Christian Boltanski. And the thing that he did, he always imagined that when others sort of copied his work and did those kinds of things, they were simply carrying his work forward. And that was okay, because the idea was initially his, and that's fine, you know, but what he wanted out of it was far larger than anything that he could have created on his own. You know, that the things that I do, if I can expand how you view something, how you interpret something that is perhaps more meaningful to you than it has been in the past, and you can grow from that experience, then nothing's better. Nothing is better. And I think that's about as good as it gets. It really is. So I try to do, not so much to do that with great intention, but I try to put everything I can that I feel into it. Oh, go ahead.
Well, let me just follow up, because something in that video that you talked earlier on, the video that was shown when you first walked into the gallery, and you saw all those comments that people had made, is this art? And I can do it. And I want to focus on that. I can do it, but yet your response was, but yet you didn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
Now we have these people who didn't do it, but yet they're artists.
Right.
And I guess that sort of disconnect, and maybe that's too strong a word to use in this case, Juan, but that's where I have some sort of question about things, in the sense that if you can do it, why don't you do it?
Well, and that's always an interesting thing, that we work with what we have to work with. It's only after we've been shown how to do it can we do it many times. And I think that's how people often use what artists have created. When I said that with the hula hoop, once you saw it, once it was done, you then said, I could do that. But the idea is what I was referencing in terms of you coming up with that idea initially. Then once it's been done, you know, you can create the wheel after the wheel has been created, but you didn't make the wheel in the first place.
Yeah.
So where do you go with that?
You build a better mousetrap.
Well, and I think that's wonderful if you're actually willing to build it.
Again, are you willing, or you just stop at the idea and says, I got this idea, you do it.
Are you just going to give us the idea of it and not build it at all?
Yeah.
There you go. Well, but then if you're willing to do that, that's wonderful. But so many people are not willing to do that, you see, because they'll keep that. Think about this. Think about how many wonderful, wonderful, wonderful inventions have died on the shelf because they never did anything with them. It's not that they weren't good ideas. They were wonderful ideas. They could have changed the world, and they died on the shelf because no one was actually willing to do it.
Yeah.
So if you're willing to take that chance, step out there, fail, take that chance again and fail again, and still be willing to take the next chance and do it anyway. That's how things get done. And I think artists spend a lifetime doing just that, taking chances. It's not always good. There are many failures, and that's okay. It comes with the territory.
I have to say, I'm so grateful that this conversation is being recorded, because especially these last few minutes, I think have embodied so much of what our team believes in, and that the ethos defines not only our core values, but also why we did this exhibition. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Any last questions or comments before we wrap up? Well, thank you all for joining. I apologize for technical difficulties. we made it work. It's raining. Half the building went down. We'll make it work. That's how we keep plugging away. That's our style. Doesn't always work, Juan, but we'll keep trying, right?
Indeed.
Such a pleasure and honor to have you on the call with us today, Juan. As I can never say it enough to you. Life-changing experience from the first day we met about whirly gigs. I have not been the same since. So thank you so much for your involvement here at the museum. We're excited that at the end of June of this year, our piece, our Juan Logan, I'll Save You Tomorrow, will be coming home and can go out on exhibition again as the museum's permanent collection. We're so honored and excited about that. We'll make sure that's advertised, and you can all get a chance to celebrate with us that monumentous moment when Juan Logan joined our permanent collection. We're honored. Juan, what?
April 3rd, last day to see the show.
Yes, April 3rd is the last date to see the show. So you've got a little bit of time. We're getting vaccinated. We'll keep you safe. The governor, we're at 100% capacity, but you still got to stay 6 feet with your mask on. So we look forward to seeing you in the gallery soon. Juan, any last comments or for us?
Thank you so much for inviting me to participate this morning and for inviting me to participate in the exhibition. It's a wonderful show.
Our
it really
pleasure,
is.
my friend. Our
And-
pleasure.
and
All right.
Clarissa, since you won't do it, a hand for you.
Oh, thanks for everybody.
Yeah, Clarissa, you did a great job moderating that. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you, everybody, so much. Juan, have a lovely day. Everyone,
you
have
as
a
well.
lovely day.
Bye.
Bye-bye.